Hey everyone, welcome back. Miss Calabrese here. So in today's video, we're going to be entering into our study of the immune system and specifically talking about your first line of defense. All right, so looking at the immune system overall, we can kind of divide it into two different categories, either innate, which is your kind of inborn response that you have right from birth, or adaptive, which is your acquired immunity that you have to build over time, that you have to kind of learn over time. And that adaptive immunity can be divided into either a cell-mediated line of defense or an antibody-mediated line. All right, so here's another way to kind of look at that and sort of divide it in between that innate and acquired immunity, or innate and adaptive immunity. So in the innate wing of your defense, we can sort of divide that into first line and second line of defense. So first line of defense are external barriers to entry. So these are things that these are kind of mechanisms that your body has to prevent pathogens from entering into the body. And so we can divide those into physical barriers, chemical barriers, genetic barriers, reflex barriers. These are all things that are considered a first line of defense that are going to prevent pathogens entering into the body, right? And so those are innate. Those are things that you're born with. Another wing of this innate immunity is your second line of defense. A second line of defense are internal innate barriers. So this is what happens after a pathogen has made it inside the body. Then we have this second line of defense, which are still innate. You're still born with these mechanisms, but it's from the inside that we're trying to take down this pathogen. And then your third line of defense is part of your adaptive immune system. So, and the adaptive immune system is specific immunity. So this is fighting a pathogen, fighting pathogens as individuals, and being able to tell the difference between different pathogens and remembering them for any later infections. All right. So looking at these different lines of defense, again, first line of defense is innate. This is external barriers to entry, so we're just blocking things from entering into the body. Right. Second line of defense is internal innate barriers. So this is once something has crossed over that first line of defense and entered into the body, then it's going to encounter your second line of defense, which are just general responses to pathogens inside the body. Right. And then the third line of defense, again, an acquired or adaptive immune response, where we're learning about that particular, your cells are learning about that particular pathogen and mounting a specific defense against it. Okay. So looking at this first line of defense in a little bit more detail here. So again, this is external barriers to entry. You're born with these responses. They can be physical or mechanical barriers. They can be chemical barriers or reflex barriers that stop things from entering into your body. Right. So some of these kind of these physical barriers or mechanical barriers are things, simple things like your skin. Right. Your skin is one of your greatest defense mechanisms against microbes. So unbroken skin forms this kind of multi-layered surface that it's very difficult for pathogens to enter into the body through your skin. You have mucous membranes that are lining the inside of your respiratory tract and your digestive tract. So those act as sort of a physical barrier against microbes entering into the body. You also have a normal microbiome. So those normal bacteria that are living on your skin and in your gut, those guys are actually protecting you. So they're considered to be part of your first line of defense because those normal bacteria, they're defending you against pathogens. So they're basically taking up space, fighting off any potential pathogens that try to enter into the body. So those would be examples of your normal microbiome. And then excuse me, as far as chemical barriers, those would be things like a lot of this has to do with pH. So the pH of your sweat is a little bit on the acidic side. The pH of your stomach is very acidic. So and bacteria in general don't particularly like acid. Some of them do, but for the most part, bacteria are not happy in low pH environments. So if we keep the pHs of these different regions of the body low, that's going to prevent the growth of bacteria. Um, and then reflex barriers are things that are just going to force bacteria out of the body, or viruses, or whatever it might be. Right. So looking more closely at the skin here as a physical or mechanical barrier. So the skin itself is multiple layers of cells that are acting as this barrier. The outermost layer of the skin is called the stratum corneum. And this is a waterproof layer of dead cells that are protecting the cells underneath it. So that these multiple layers of protection are helping prevent any bacteria or viruses from getting into the body. And also the fact that you're constantly shedding skin. So you're constantly shedding these top layers of dead skin. You're also shedding hair. And that kind of periodic shedding is going to prevent the accumulation of microbes. So it's constantly keeping things in motion. Same thing is true for the production of sweat, right? So you're constantly producing sweat. It's being pushed out of little exocrine ducts to the surface of your skin. And this is keeping things in motion. Anytime we're keeping things in motion, we're preventing stagnancy, and stagnancy breeds microbes. So if we can keep things moving, like constantly shedding skin or moving mucus or moving sweat, then we're going to prevent the stagnancy and potential accumulation of microbes on that surface. Right. So mucous membranes work in a similar way. So these are also kind of multiple layers of epithelial tissue that are acting as protection. But now we're going to be coated in mucus. That mucus is also constantly moving, right? So we're moving that mucus around. It's going to, one, impede the entry of bacteria or viruses. So they're going to have a tough time getting through that mucus layer to the actual cells. And the fact that we're constantly moving it is, again, keeping things from building up on the surface. So keeping things in constant flow is going to be preventing increased microbial load. Right. Also along your respiratory tract, so in addition to just being lined with mucous membrane, we've got the epithelial tissue there is ciliated, meaning that it's covered in tiny little cilia that are going to be constantly moving that mucus. And they basically move it from the lower respiratory tract up into your pharynx. So it's constantly moving this mucus upward as a way to keep things moving. So anything that you inhale and makes it down into your lower respiratory tract is going to be caught in this mucus. The cilia is going to push it back up. So eventually you can cough it up and swallow it, where it will die in your low pH stomach. Okay. Similar things are true throughout your urinary tract. So a low pH, again, there is going to keep microbial load low and keep the balance of microbes proper so that we don't end up with infections. All right. And like I mentioned before, just this, the maintenance of a steady resident microbiome act as a first line of defense. So if you think about, if you can think about bacteria in the same way that you think about kind of any critters, they're going to defend their territory. And once these resident microbes have taken up space on your skin or in your gut or wherever they might be, they're going to defend that territory. So they're going to defend you against invading pathogens. Right, so here's a nice close look at that ciliary escalator. So the cilia that are lining the mucous membranes in your respiratory tract that are able to catch pathogens and kind of carry them up and out of the lungs into the throat where they can be swallowed. Right. In addition to these mechanical defenses, and we also have some chemical defenses. And the chemicals, like I said, a lot of these have to do with pH. So just maintaining a slightly lower pH, which is going to make those bacteria unhappy and not able to thrive as well. But then there are also some specific chemicals that have particular jobs here. So one of those that stands out is lysozyme. So lysozyme is an enzyme that you have in your tears and in your saliva, and it basically destroys peptidoglycan. so that it's kind of this first kind of non-specific defense in your eyes and in your mouth that's going to help destroy bacteria. And again, a lot of these mechanisms just have to do with acid. So the fact that your sweat is a little bit acidic, your skin is a little bit acidic, your urinary tract is a little acidic, and your gut, especially in the stomach, is acidic. All of that is going to help lead to kind of a general antimicrobial effect. All right. There are also some kind of genetic differences in susceptibility to pathogens. So I mentioned you've got physical, chemical, reflex barriers, and then also these genetic differences. And genetic differences usually just have to do with a genetic propensity for some of um, these other mechanisms. So for example, if you've got a genetic propensity to produce more saliva or to produce more lysozyme, that's going to have a protective effect for you. Okay, so for each one of these barriers, let's figure out whether they are chemical barriers, physical barriers, or genetic barriers. So hydrochloric acid, sloughing of skin cells, lysozyme in your saliva, a mutation for gene and complement proteins, and the ciliary escalator. All right, so there's your answer. So hydrochloric acid is obviously a chemical barrier. Sloughing of skin is a physical barrier. Lysozyme is a chemical barrier. A mutation in the gene that produces complement proteins, which are defense proteins, that's genetic. And then the ciliary escalator is a physical barrier. All right, so I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions.